We are very excited today. Well, first of all, I'm Asali Divine Ecclesiastes. I'm the CEO of the Ashe Cultural Arts Center. And I am here with two amazing culture bearers to talk about what is the cultural infrastructure of New Orleans. As we're in this conversation around roads and bridges, what are the things that our culture needs in order to thrive and survive? So there's a well-known saying here in New Orleans that our culture bubbles up from the sidewalk. I'd like to posit that that is a mythical statement, which proclaims the abundance of our cultural production and intimates its role as a natural resource for the almost magical ease with which it is created. Our 60-minute panel will explore the architecture behind that magic. What are the basic systems that undergird cultural production and cultural economy? And what happens when the sidewalks are cracked, faulty, or altogether missing? As experts in these undergirding systems, our panelists will examine the ways in which structural failures have created vast disparities that disadvantage not only the most apparent victims of said disparity, but the economy and quality of life of our city and state as a whole. We will investigate solutions that imagine new systems capable of undergirding a just economy and highlight the transformative power of art and culture to bring about the changes we seek. And to have that conversation, I want to introduce you to my panelists. So I wanted to do something a little different in my introduction. I wanted to introduce them from a cultural perspective. You can't hear me? Oh, can anybody hear me?
I can hear you pretty good.
Oh.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
I can hear you as well.
Okay, great, thank you. So it seems that Gina is having a problem with the sound. I'm going to type into the chat for her. Except I don't see her name on the chat. Interesting. All right, chat to everyone. Gina. Oh, she's gone out. All right, well, let's see if she can get back in. Where is no? Give us one quick second. Nesby, how are you making your camera do all of that? Okay. Okay, if you guys don't mind, I'm just going to give a quick second for Gina to get back in.
Yeah, because I don't know, it's like, I couldn't hear anything, so I signed off.
Okay, hold one second. Oh, hi, Ashley. Gina is in the waiting room. If someone can let her back in.
We moved her.
Okay, great, thank you. I wish I had some music to share with you.
Okay. Yes. Hi, sorry about that.
All good. Can you hear us? You good?
Yes, I can
Wonderful.
finally hear you guys.
All right. So good. Well, I was just about to do the introduction, and you missed my, little fancy description of the panel, but you
Oh,
saw that all in
okay.
advance.
Okay.
So I said, rather than the usual introduction, I wanted to give like a cultural introduction. I mean, both of you, as well as our other panelists, when he's able to join, have bios that people can look up. But I wanted to share with the group how I came to know each of you as a way of demonstrating what cultural infrastructure, is about and what it does and how it, works in action. So
Yes.
for
Okay.
Gina, and it's just, so happens that your name is Charbonnet, so alphabetically start with you. But so as a very young woman, trying to get into the production world, right? And working for events like Jazz Fest and Essence and Voodoo, and being one of the few, if not often only, Black faces that were in the rooms and that were on the field, so to speak, and that were behind the scenes. I saw you like a person who, like, even before I got a job at Jazz Fest, I would be in the crowd and see you with your radio on, moving around, telling people what to do and how to go and where to go, right? And, that for me was so inspirational. And then when I got into the work and saw the example that you set, at those tables and in those spaces where Black people were not represented, not necessarily not allowed, quote unquote, but just not well represented. You not only represented, but when younger Black folk came into the picture, you empowered, you created pathways, and you taught us how to represent ourselves with excellence and always in the best light. And whenever there was an opportunity around, you made sure to shepherd us into those opportunities.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so thank you so much for
Thank you.
side of our culture. And then y'all can Google her, okay, and learn of the multifaceted and amazing work that she does in the world and the way she represents New Orleans all over the world. But that is also what she does right here in our city. And so now I would like to introduce you to Nesby Phipps. So I only personally met Mr. Phipps recently, but I have been a fan of his for a while, because this is also how culture works, right? Sometimes you can just put a message out there and it gets absorbed and it gets actualized. And one day I'm driving my kids to school and I see this mural and it says, if you Black, then you rich and you got buku power. And it was so moving and motivation. Like, so we have a little bounce song in my house, right? It goes, if you Black, then you're rich and you got buku power. If you Black, then you're rich and you got buku power, right? And it comes with all kind of different lyrics depending on what the day is. But the point is that it is something that one is transformational, because it gives us an opposite message of what society tells us that we are, right? And it also makes you take account, of those things. It makes you take account of your riches, and it makes you take account of your power and actualize them, in a very different way. So, I call him, a philosopher, because that's what wisdom does, right? When you put it out into the world, and culture has a way of elevating wisdom and helping us to make changes. So I want to bring us into the questions, and when OT gets on, I'll tell you guys how I came to know him. And I'm going to just start the questions off, and you guys just chime in as you feel. So the first question is, much like climate advocates, culture bearers have been sounding the alarm for years about the existential threats to their environment. What do you see those threats as, and how can they be addressed and ameliorated? Nesby, look like you're feeling it. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, he.
All
Oh,
right, I got it. Y'all can hear me now?
yeah.
Yes,
All right, all right. I'm still not used to Zoom. Y'all forgive me.
we're all
goodness.
not SB, so it's something we have to get used to. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Right. But could you repeat the question for me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were saying, like, much like climate advocates, culture bearers have been the ones that have been sounding the alarm, around the threats to our culture, for a long time especially since Katrina, talking about the conditions of our communities that are killing the culture. So, what is your assessment of what some of those threats are and some potential solutions to them?
A lot of everything, a lot of my solutions are rooted outside of legislation and outside of policy.
Mhm.
Culture begins with people, and unfortunately, it ends with policy, or the lack thereof. So, in a time where information is abundantly accessible, one of the conversations that I have whenever I come in contact with people who aspire to be in the culture or actively in the culture, the whole nine, is to educate yourself on how you can compete. Because before I'm an artist, before someone is a wild man or a spy boy or anything like that, we are active citizens. And as special as we are, there is nothing that shields us from somebody come and take over a neighborhood if we don't beat them to the punch first. I'm not one I don't personally believe that policy would stop that from happening, because it hasn't. Neighborhoods are being overran. So if you remove the people, you remove the culture, period. So I talk about increasing earning potential, understanding what intellectual properties are. I preach that no matter who I talk to. Like, I come from a musical space, but I rarely ever talk to people about the music they're making, more so how to own, protect, and catapult and use it as a powerful tool. Because if you have your catalog set up correctly, you could use that as, collateral or whatever to get yourself approved for a line of credit to get a home or commercial space or whatever it is you want. So I'm talking about playing chess with the things that we have within our power. I don't operate I rarely walk into government buildings. I do talk to government officials in a personal sense. I actually don't deal with policies because I am what I like to call active ingredient based. And the active ingredient, just like in the medicine, it's not the flavor, it's not the form, it's not the capsule, the powder. It's the one thing that is healing the sickness. One of the most important things is owning yourself, knowing how to position what you own, and using that to advance yourself. So those are the things that I actually speak and preach, because the time it takes for some elected officials, for one, to have the interest in something, two, actually put the time, money, and effort towards it, a whole generation has passed by. And I like to get to the punch, the meat and potatoes and stuff. So personal economic empowerment, understanding what intellectual properties are and how to move those around and how to take advantage of the great equalizer we call the internet. So that's always my approach.
Excellent. And very different points. And I want to touch on some of that as well. Oh, and Councilmember Thomas has joined us, I think, at a perfect time. Hello, Councilmember. I don't see you on my screen. All right, there you are. So I'm going to ask Gina to respond to the question, and then I will introduce Councilmember Thomas.
Yeah, and I actually, definitely co-sign what Nesby's saying. And Nesby, good seeing you again. I haven't seen you in a minute. It's been a couple of years. I actually moderated a panel that's similar at the Creative Carnival a couple of years ago with Nesby. But my thing too is it's really about, I'm concerned about the equity and also erasure. And definitely what Nesby's talking about is that we have got to really understand our value and our equity and what our culture holds for everybody that comes in this city and decides they want to give a festival here. They want to go have a good time here. They want to, let's get drunk and party here, all this stuff. But, when they come in and they start, saying, okay, yeah, we want to have a second line band, even if it's a wedding, I want to have a second line band. or if I want to have Mardi Gras Indians as an event because I need to have some cultural, I just because I'm so fascinated with it, right? We have to understand that likeness, the appropriation, the representation, the things our ancestors actually created is the presentation of the Indian suits, which is, I mean, it's an amazing, amazing art, right? To just sew these things, which I don't even think people who definitely, want to hire these beautiful Indians have no idea about the cultural integrity of these artworks and of our cultural integrity and traditions that make New Orleans, New Orleans. And my thing is that if we don't start, really working with officials, I don't know if it's city officials, organizations, I don't know who it is at this point, but we have got to really start some kind of conversations about who are the gatekeepers, who do we trust to create policy that actually protects us. So when these corporations come into the city, want to say, oh, okay, I want to do a festival, but they're going to hire your company at 20% less than they pay somebody from LA or New York, that's a problem. Because to me, our city is still, they keep saying, okay, that's a cost of living thing. It's a cost of professional, training or whatever. That is not the case. In some cases, and I'm going to say it's a matter of education about what you're looking for, these companies looking for. But just because in the Southeast, this does not mean that we're not paying the same prices on certain things and goods and services you pay in LA, New York, or Chicago. So we have really got to start working on a different level with people we trust that know what that experience that actually, just are in bigger spaces. I don't want to say big spaces, just have this sort of, that are open to negotiate and talking about what they really want. I think we have to start really thinking about who are these cultural barrier sort of policymakers that can actually, work in unison, with the government and different organizations to actually create some kind of equity and also educate the governments about the having the experience I have as a production company, and having the opportunity to work with larger clients. I've had these conversations and it's always about the equity. We have to really start seeing New Orleans as an investment. We have to start, really having those conversations so that we're not just giving away our services. And my other thing about erasure, I'm not going to keep going on, is if we don't hold on to integrity of our culture, and if we don't, start valuing our culture more and our likeness more, it's going to be diluted and ultimately erased.
Yep.
And that wouldn't, my thing is like the traditions we know being like cooking, like Creole cooking. How often do you see a Creole cooking restaurant now? It's all these fusion cuisines with these people who have these grand ideas about, oh, I'm going to add Japanese cooking to Creole cooking. It's like, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
Even though it's great, you have your audience for that, but we have literally got to really start talking about how to have more equity in our communities. So I'm going to get off my soapbox.
No. We love your soapbox. And and that is what this conversation is about, right? Like, as we are talking about these huge investments that are going to be coming into our spaces. And as we're talking about the fact, that in New Orleans, culture is the industry. Right. Art is the industry. It's the driving factor, for hospitality and tourism, which has seen, its numbers soar over the past few years. But that, to your point of equity, that progress, that largesse is not shared by the people who actually, create the cultural products that people, as you mentioned, are so fascinated with. Oh, great, council member. You came back right on time for my policy question. And so first of all, I just want to acknowledge, how much it means for us to have you here right now, understanding the fight that you are having on our behalf at this moment. The council member is involved in a redistricting conversation that is at the heart of what we are talking about in terms of culture and equity, and what infrastructures and supports are built around us. And council member, I, did a brief introduction of everyone, tell them they could Google you, if they want to know who you are, right? But I was sharing how I came to know each of you and your importance, in my view, in terms of the cultural infrastructure of New Orleans. So as a young artist, my art is poetry and spoken word. And I used to run a couple of venues here in town, and the council member would come to those venues. And so not only would he share his art, he would tell us how important it was for us to bring our voices to civic spaces, how important it was that those conversations that we were having in the realm of these artistic, and especially, as young artists, we were in our 20s and we knew it all and we were going to change the world. But not one of us, like Nesby said, spent any time in government buildings, right? Like that was an anathema, but you helped us to see, and I say us because it wasn't just, me. I know a lot of folks know about my, stint inside of city government, but there are lots of other civic spaces, right, where artists can bring their influence to bear that are not just that. So if you could share with us, a little bit about that. And we were talking about existential threats to the cultural environment.
Yeah. First of all, guys, thank you, and I apologize. We're still in the middle of this redistricting piece, but it relates to this conversation. I've lost my screen, but I can hear you, and hopefully you guys can hear me. As I was listening to the earlier discussion about how do we deal with those threats and how can they be ameliorated, especially those that maybe as existential to people trying to mimic the culture. And I think we have to do a better job of making sure it's part of the educational fiber of our community. And to let folk know that our culture, we're not caricatures in that culture. It's our souls and the history of our existence that are part of that. So it's nothing to be mocked. It's not comedic, even when it's funny. And it's not something that's exaggerated. It's who we are. So I think we have to do a better job at that. From a policy decision, this is really, really, really crucial and critical, right? Because in a global economy where people are moving around, in an age where people can get elected if they meet the criteria in your community, if they don't understand, not from the culture, if they don't understand the culture, if they haven't taken time to understand the history of the culture, know the culture, then we see many of the battles we're having right now with folk who represent our city, but don't understand the soul of a Mardi Gras Indian. They don't understand Asali, like we were singing the other day, New Orleans street songs.
Yes.
That we grew up on. And it's very basic, you don't understand Burgundy versus Burgundy. Melpomene versus Melpomene. You don't understand that the third war may be the second war, but we call it the third war, right? You don't understand the lower nine versus the nine and the rest in the culture and the history in the rest of the nine. So I think at some point there has to be a political education for folk who like the merriment of our culture, but don't understand that it's the heart and soul in the existence of our culture. And I think we have to be intentional now, especially since school and education and what is 21st century education is in flux, that our culture and our history needs to be part of the curriculum at every level of education within these boundaries. And then I'll say this because I can, in that people who are not from here need to be real careful about, even with their best intentions, about them coming here to save us, right? Coming here to redefine us. Now, we've already been defined, right? And we've already saved us, so we wouldn't be here in spite of what we've been through. And I think we can have those discussions in a way where we appreciate the fact that you want to live here. We appreciate the fact that you want to study this. We appreciate the fact that you even want to represent us. But if you're here to save us, you could have started by saving where you were from, because we all have problems and we all have challenges and issues everywhere. And then lastly, on that front, we still have not figured out our value, what our worth is here culturally, what our worth even is here spiritually. And at some point, the cultural community has to begin to do that, so people understand, there's economic opportunity attached to our engagement with you, and it has to be met and adequately met, or we don't need you to engage us.
And so what you bring up, council member, is like kind of a dichotomy, because part of the reason, right, that they like to strip things of the essence is in order to commodify it. I'm seeing some conversation in the chat about experiences folks have had, with that reduced version, of our culture, our music, our food, in various places where, people attempt to mimic it, or even if they're trying to honor it. I won't, say that they're trying to mimic it, but in any case, the commodification of it, makes it not authentic in the way that you're speaking of, and also makes it not have returns for the actual creators. And so that is when that exploitation, right, comes into play, that both Nesby and Gina so eloquently talked about, and how it affects the culture community. And what I have noticed is that, as a child of New Orleans, but a traveler of the world, the inequities that we instill here don't just affect the most vulnerable of us, right? This affects our total outcomes as a state compared to other places in the nation, because we are so invested in our inequity. We will pay for the right to be racist. We will pay for the right, to dominate and look down on and diminish and exploit, and extract from others. How can we use this current infusion of investment that we all see coming, and that's kind of the theme of this conference, right, to build a different kind of infrastructure, to embed some kind of equitable outcomes, for culture bearers? First, I would like to hear from, Nesby as an artist, to say what kinds of things would you like to see in the ecosystem for artists, and then let's talk through what are the kinds of policies that lead to the production of those things. Oh, you're muted, Nesby. We can't hear you.
You get me now? All right, so more than I can tell you what I like to see, I have something for you to see. I like to show you all the work. So in the chat, you see secondlinesunday.com. All right, I've been owning that for about 2 years, and right now I am creating a database as well as a series of interviews on everybody from the culture, dealing from bands to tribes, as well as S&Ps. So
I see it in the chat.
Oh, you know what?
You put it in again?
Yeah, let me do it again. So this is just a trailer and for everybody to subscribe to.
Yeah.
But this is my, not even attempt. This is me building a gate around our culture. This is me making an official space in a virtual space, landing space that we all can come together and agree upon what this culture is, and you must abide by these guidelines according to us. Because at no point is there ever a space publicly for us to speak for ourselves, even while we sleep. Instead of having to stand outside with a picket sign or stand in some sort of official meeting, even while we sleep, there's representation for us, at least in the virtual space, or starting at the virtual space. You see a lot of things when you come to city and you're typing in and you look up, things to do here, so on and so forth. And my point is, with what I'm doing with this, is we matter just as much as Galatois and anything else that'll pop up in the top of the search when you type it in, because this is ultimately what they come for. So, so as far as what I would like to see, here it is. Y'all check it out and stay tuned to what's coming, moving forward. We got St. Joseph Night coming. We got Super Sunday coming. We just had a second line last weekend. It's 2 second lines this weekend. So we're going to be covering all of that stuff on there. And this will be, the mainstay. This will be the home place. This is where you're not it unless we tag you from this site on anything going on with the culture. So this is my attempt. So as far as, like I said earlier about policies, I don't know about them. Anybody that make them, I love to talk to you about them. But when we talk, I'm gonna let you know what's in motion already. Because culture can only be protected from a cultural space before it can be protected anywhere else. We're not looking for saviors, but we do accept support.
Absolutely, and we accept self-actualization because it is our. I believe that our policymakers should be culture bearers as well. Gina, what is your insight?
Sorry. I mean, as far as my insight's concerned, I mean, for me, COVID to me was a time where I think we all were able to take some stock into thinking about two innovative ways to move forward. And I do think because we have so many things that people do, as Nesby said, come into the city and really absorb. It's like New Orleans is like this come one kind of city that everybody comes to get healed or get, have this sort of connection with themselves. But to me, I really do want, production companies and culture bearers and even businesses to really think about ways that we can integrate sort of, artists, cultural bearers more, and to figure out some innovative ways around how to do live events. Because to me, what COVID taught us is that we have to not exist just in this world, in this space that's physical. We have to exist in another space too. It's not just virtual at this point. I think we have to start thinking about the metaverse and all these places, that now exist, the virtual reality spaces, that really, I think now is the time to think about how can we create an experience or create sort of these events to even, figure out a way to make money, while in New Orleans and creating some event that, people all over the world can virtually just to sign into, and experience music, experience the food, experience all these things. I think we have to start thinking in a different way about what we do. And to me, start thinking about what is the value, as, Councilman Thomas said, we got to think about the value and all that, because the thing is that, all the traditions that we take for granted, the masking Indian, and I'm not saying we take that for granted so much, or the second lines, or the music that, bubbles up, like we said, from the pavement here, are all the musicians that, New Orleans is birth, like the Christian Scotts and the John Baptistes and all these people. We have to think about a way, how can we monetize that? For me, I'm always thinking about how do you create a sort of financial model, a revenue model around something that will give these people, give musicians, give people equitable wages. That's what I'm always thinking about, because the thing is that, everybody's always, we're such happy people. For us, the thing I think that just makes us New Orleanians is that we're so just proud, and, the culture, everything, like I said, our food, the art, the music. I think even the way we dress, I think New Orleans definitely have their own sense of style. I think all that, gets people to come as community and invest. And what they do is they come and they take and they take and they take and they take. And my thing is, how do we figure out a way to make this more equitable, so that, the musicians are making a cost of living, or any artist making a cost of living here where it's above the poverty line. We've got to start also, I think, start thinking about, our quality of life, and how can we also contribute to making everybody's life, the collective, better, right? So that we're all better in the end. But that's the kind of things that I'm thinking about as far as, like, in regards to production, and a way I would like to move forward. It's more about how can we figure out a way, to go beyond here. What's the things that happen in the next 10, 20 years that we can figure out a way that people get paid more. And again, they can take care of themselves and their families and their communities more, and we can invest just in the, venerating, just the things that we know our ancestors created, that, again, to me, in a certain sense, are being diluted, how do we hold on to that integrity? And how do we do that in a way that also monetizes it?
That is a very great point, and it touches on a question in the chat, or at least a comment in the chat from someone named Oz, who points out something that I think is often a tension point, around, because we talk about, the commodification of our culture, but we do need to be able to make money from it, but we also need to, as you say, venerate it, right? And, Oz talks about understanding our culture on a level deeper than just art and entertainment. And I think that gets to what you said, Gina, about, part of our culture. I mean, look, fashion, dress, man, look, you can't find no flyer people on the planet Earth,
That's their second lives.
in New Orleans, baby, come to a second life, so they put parents to shame. But just the essence of who we are. And so like that, a person working in a hotel, to me, is a culture bearer. They're bringing their full self, the experience of their community, the joy and love that they have for the world and the spirit that's in them. And that means something, to the people who experience it. And one, it should be treated in a dignified way. And two, that dignity begins with paying it properly. And so I want to bring the conversation to Councilmember Thomas about like, how do we achieve that? Because it's achievable in a policy and systemic way, because it happens in other places. There are places in Europe, where sustainable tourism is embedded, and, the cultural product is shared throughout the city, or the largesse, the profits from the cultural product are systemically shared throughout all communities. How can we achieve that here?
First, I want to address a couple of things. Someone put in chat, they asked a question about the money from New Orleans and Company, and that we invest in these tourism brokers. We could start there by making sure that not only multicultural tourism, but I'll be more specific, because people are afraid to say Black or African-American many times today. And so, don't be afraid to say, so that Black folk can make more money, or African-American can make more money, so that those agencies and those cultural bearers and those people who work within the culture, that they have an opportunity to participate on the front end, when that money to market our community and advertise our community, and that money for events are slated in the first place. The other thing, it's interesting we're having this conversation, because when you look at economic scales in business, usually if you invest $1, you want to try to count on a 2.5 to 3 time investment. Well, guess how lucrative arts, culture, and entertainment and sports are. You invest $1, man, at minimum. The last time I checked, you're looking at 6 to 7 times or more the investment. So the spread of the return, actually in the area where we're feeling it or hurting the most, even though we sustain the culture, there's most times there's like no return. The folk who have the worth are actually taking an L. So that's crazy that we're having that discussion when the economic multiplier is actually greater, Asali, in the areas that produce what we produce to the world, right? When you talk about partnering with policymakers or legislators or political leaders, there has to be front-end negotiations. Major events, whether they're cultural or entertainment or concerts or the like, or festivals, the government is usually involved. There's some front-end concessions or breaks that are given. Well, on the negotiating agenda, there has to be, okay, well, you get this break, but you have to make sure that our culture bearers and those folk who have expertise in this particular discipline, that they're included on the front end. Asali, I'm familiar with the story that relates to you. Several years ago, when some major cultural events were changing hands, the people who came here and asked you to train the people who you were supposed to work under, instead of allowing you to maintain your position and train them in the area where you had already had expertise. That's crazy, but it happens across the board. You didn't know I knew that.
Calling. And I didn't know, but
and you didn't even tell me anything about it. So here's someone who spent their life to this cultural expertise and this entertainment expertise, this venue changes hands, and then the group asks you to work for somebody who don't not only know anything about our community, but who you had to train so that this event would be successful. That's crazy. So, if I'm involved or elected on the front end, you have somewhere to go, so we can tell these people, not only is that not going to happen, but maybe it threatens your concessions, or maybe it threatens your ability to get some of the breaks that you get. So those are just some of the things that I think we can do with policymakers on the front end. And I think Nesby is right. You don't want to count on politics to deal with our culture, but if nothing else, you want to know that it's there in terms of it understands the event, it understands the culture, and it's there to protect you if you need somebody to go to.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump in real quickly, Congressman Townsend, because the whole thing too is that these big corporations that come here get tax credits on the back end. And a lot of tax credits are dependent upon the number of people in Louisiana they hire, right, to qualify. So I think you're right. All that needs to be discussed, and it also needs to be discussed what companies they're hiring, and how to, because, it's kind of interesting, I always hear like, oh, certain companies, or I've been told my company doesn't have the bandwidth or whatever. And I'm like, I think that's all a crack of whatever. But to me, I'm like, it's the conversations that I think needs to be had between, again, the government who's cutting the brakes. Because at the end of the day, if you have a certain budget, you're going to get millions back beyond the revenue. And people have to understand, like, it's all business, like, but if we're not challenging people to say, okay, you have to hire people at this level, and also you have to also honestly come back and give us a report about what you're doing. I mean, not just say, hey, this is what I did. Show us what you did. Show us the numbers. Show us the data. I would love to see that. So we all understand, like, what's the investment back in the community when you get a break tax-wise. So I can go on and on. Like I said, Asali and I have some deep conversations, but I do think all that, again, is, as we talk about policy in all these things, I think we have to continue to have those conversations around why they're getting all these tax breaks. I understand it's to give people put state money back into the state economy or New Orleans economy, but we need to hold people accountable.
Yes, clawbacks, right? Like, not just on the front end, but like the same things that they do with the developers and the contractors when they don't abide by it, take it back, but also, like, I want to get to some of the things, that provide, like, just basic services to people who create the culture. Like, why is it that our communities are the ones with the greatest health disparities? Why is it that our communities are the ones with the least actual working infrastructure? And that's hard to say in New Orleans, especially right now. But, we have a lack of safety. We have a lack of access to health, health centers. Like, we or 60% of the population and 7% of health resources are in our communities. Like, how does that go? What about our transportation? What about the education? As the council member said, we were part of a reparations conference this weekend that talked about the fact that, when children are aware of their Black identity and are invested in that, I mean, and imagine if our children in New Orleans were invested in our culture in the right ways, like that their academic success is exponentially better, right? When your kid, knows who they are and from whence they came, and Gina, you mentioned our ancestral responsibilities, often in this conversation. Like, if our kids knew who their ancestors were and what they accomplished, like the council member said, here in New Orleans, in spite of, all of the oppression, what would their achievement level be? And, there's some comments in the chat around, how the charter school system has deconstructed, our education and those opportunities. There was a mention here, about a strike. The Hot Egg Band and I always have this idea, about campaign called No Justice, No Music, right? Like, what if, just everybody just stop playing until we get some just laws, we can't do nothing for you, right? In terms of the spiritual energy that you need from our music. Like, let's not act like this is an extra, right? You all stay here and you want to be here because your spirit needs, what this culture is feeding you. So how do we feed the culture systemically, the same way that we feed the oil industry, the same way we feed the hospitality and tourism industry, the same way we feed the contractor and development industry? How do we feed the actual reason for being?
I think that's the biggest challenge right now, ultimately, at the end of the day, because sustainability, we've been resilient, right? We know how to survive, but what does sustainability look like? Is it mimic? Are we swapped out? I tell folk about my travel abroad. My cousin Lillian Bouty invited me to a conference years ago because they always did a New Orleans festival in Switzerland, Estonia festival in Switzerland. And because the mayor couldn't go one year, she said asked for her cousin to come and go. And I saw so many other cultures from around the world who sound like, act like, and played like all of the great artists that we have here. And they spent their lives in that craft mimicking that, right? So we're starting to see it here. We see pop-up bands for folk that pop up for the moment, right? Well, I don't know nobody in it. They don't look like nobody I grew up with. And it's not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but they're only here for a moment, and they're only here to entertain that particular venue. And they don't rise up from our community. So when I said earlier that I think it has to be part of the curriculum, I think cultural bears have to be intentional about training folk up. There's an extra effort right now within the Mardi Gras Indian community, right? Where former Big Chief Rudy Bocage with my cousin Chief Romeo 9100s, that's my little cuz, where they're intentionally reaching out to younger brothers and sisters about how to sew, what to glue, what not to glue, what's authentic, how do you represent? And I think that intentionality has to be at every level of our culture if it's going to sustain moving forward, because we live in a global society, we live in a mimic world right now. And highest and best value doesn't mean just because you have more value, you're the best value.
Yes, indeed. And so on that note, I know we come into our time and y'all know we can talk. I want to encourage everybody. So next time, next time we're gonna have to do that 90-minute. Yes, and you are still, yes, please go fight for our districts. But I also want to encourage everyone to read Catherine Johnson's note in the chat that she took the time to type in for us. And she makes very beautiful and valid points around the power of culture and its ability to heal, and the ability to provide safety, and just culture as a mental health resource, and and how we're trying to implement that more and more. And so my last question was, as society's most trusted messengers, artists and culture makers should be considered natural allies for policymakers. We are able to learn, interpret, align, and share complex ideas and processes with citizens in ways that exponentially increase understanding and thereby impact. Artists have proven to be models for advocacy and messaging, healthy workplace culture, transparency in government processes, and transformative community partnership. How do we activate this intrinsic value in ways that lead to economic parity?
I think everything we've talked about here, and I'll go now so that I can go and finish what that thing I was into. I think everything we've talked about leads to that parity, right? And that importance of not only how we're successful now, but how we're successful centuries or decades from now. There's a saying about people who live right now. They do what they do right now because of the people they'll never meet in the future. And I think the same thing has to be in terms of our culture. Every baby, every newborn, Every mom, every dad, every business, everyone who moves here has had the understanding of, man, when we were having the whole discussion about Congo Square, when people ask me why I was for not moving City Hall to Congo Square, because we're one of the few places where our dead people live. So why would you put a building on top of their souls, right? My relatives come out of that neighborhood. My relatives are Jalukes and August and Francises and Boyds and Thomases and Iganas and Iganos. And all of my dear family still live in Congo Square. So why would I put a building on top of them? It just didn't make sense to me. So why we would put people who don't understand our culture, who come in for the moment of our culture, why would we put them on top of us? Love y'all.
Ashe, thank you, Baba.
Thank you.
Keep fighting for us. Appreciate you. All right, Nes, he drops the mic on us. Nesby, what you got?
It all goes back to my original point. It's just you have to lead. All your actions have to be led with ownership, and not for a fight of ownership. Because to have to fight for it means you've already lost control of it. So we have to walk with that, whatever your respective field is within the culture, whether you are from a tribe, whether you are from a band, or even on the legal side or the production side, like Gina and all these other things. All of these parts matter, and it's just about creating. Like he was saying about the Indians reaching back and teaching kids how to properly sew and understand the do's and the don'ts of it. There needs to be an apprenticeship on every level. You have to know what stage that you are in and understand the responsibility of making sure it moves forward. And you have to, all of that comes with operating ownership and understand that you have a responsibility, because you don't build a business just for your lifetime. You build a business to have its own life. So you don't center it around yourself, you center yourself around a business, and that's how you operate within it as far as culture is concerned, and it'll keep itself going and grow and move like everything else does in nature, if we operate in that in that space.
Thank you for that. Ashe.
Ashe. I don't know. Wow. I mean, both Nesby and Councilman Thomas, and but for me, it's like, I really think that, we have to know our intrinsic value. We have to understand Black culture, Black people, we have value. We have created this place. Our ancestors are the slave. I mean, look at the city, look at everything around us, the architecture, like I said, the cooking, it's here. Know your value. And just because, I mean, listen, we've all been in situations where it's like, hey, I gotta make a choice. I don't need to make this money. But my thing is, like, don't sell your soul, right? Your soul is not worth it. You have to stand in your worth. Like I said, I think for me, it starts too with not hiring, I won't say that, Lord Jesus, forgive me, putting the right politicians in place that are gonna fight for you and that know your city. My thing is, like, if you the people who are from here, our families have, been invested in neighborhoods for centuries, for decades, whatever. Know that you're putting people in office who are going to protect your voice and protect
and protect your wealth, Gina. Because to your point,
yeah.
I mean, to both of your points, like, I if you're Black, then you're rich and you got buku power. Like, I feel it in every bit of my spirit and my cell, right? But I also know and witness, like, I see outcomes, and I know how policy can strip that wealth from you, right? Like, how it works hard at it, right? Like the systemic things that shape our neighborhoods, even outside of our will, right? In ways that, and I won't say in ways that we can't control, ways that which we have not accessed our control, to your point, by way of the policymakers that we put in place. Like, yes, we do have buku power. How do we actualize it in the ways that are best for our communities?
Right. And for people who will make the right decisions for us, not for themselves. That's all I'm going to say. But I do think we also have to figure out a way to also have people that have the knowledge, who have the experience, in dealing with culture in a way that, as a creative entrepreneur, you know what, pay those people to actually create some agency. And when I say agency, like put them on committees, state committees, whatever you gotta do. I mean, honestly, you know, invest in culture. It's what New Orleans is. I mean, what would New Orleans be without our culture? You know, we have to start really investing in the notion of the overall arching. We're here because of this. Go ahead, Nesby, I'm sorry.
And that's why I like to encourage within our, you know, behind our closed doors, ownership literally of land down here. Because I can say from a personal standpoint, it wasn't until I bought a house in Highland Grove that I understood, that I knew by name who my councilman person was. So there's a lot of things that shape the world around us that we never tap into. Why? Because why would we if all I'm doing is just renting here? Yeah. So when I'm talking ownership, we are people before I'm part of Wild Chapel Toolers, right? So these things that's happening outside of the culture need to be involved in that as well. So the ownership things, it goes way further than some feathers. We need to own the land that we stand on, and that way we'll have a more I don't know, we just have more gumption about the acquisition of this information and empowering ourselves, and you know, that's when I started showing up to meetings in the neighborhood or in the city council when I started owning the land. And I was concerned about when they was building some apartment complex in the middle of Highland Grove. Why I own land here? So we have to see ourselves in that light, and more than just, oh, I'm the lady that make the sweets, and as charming as it is to be that horn player or that dancer, I am an active participant and citizen in the municipal side of this.
Yes.
That's what we're being overran by. And I can honestly say it is a struggle for some people, almost like it's almost happening subconsciously that some people only see themselves as the talent, and they're fighting for the crumbs that they have, as opposed to taking a step back and be like, wait, I'm mad on a way bigger level. And I think a lot of our interest is so micro that they miss the macro. And then before you know it, you got to go live out in Shell Mat just so you could get as close to New Orleans as you can. So we have to normalize
that right there. You know, how do we normalize that? They're speaking about this in the chat as well. Catherine is talking about the fact that we are not broke. Dejan talking about, you know, the Claiborne Bridge and the policy that took away so much land from so much ownership, intergenerational ownership, you know, in that one municipal act, right? But if we were empowered inside of our municipality, you know, in the ways that we need to be. And I know, Lord, I'm about to take us into a whole nother hour conversation, because I want to talk about how we could actualize at the state level with some new data that the data center came out with about how the state tries to hollow out our political power as a city. So we're going to have to come back. Thank you, Urban League, for this platform. We're going to continue this conversation on as many platforms as the community will allow, as our policymakers will allow, as our cultural institutions will allow, and as our artists will allow and spread all of this wisdom and love and knowledge and true solution building that leads to the kind of equity we all can enjoy. Thank you all so much for your participation and your activity in the chat. Oh yes, access to the port. See, we need this other hour. Oh my goodness. Yes, all right. We're gonna do this again. Please join us when we do. Special thanks to my panelists. I so appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
All right.
So y'all better